The summit chamber fell silent as Ambassador Kelrix of the Vorian Collective raised his crystalline hand. 50 species had gathered on the neutral station Axiom 7, their representatives arranged in concentric circles beneath the vaulted dome that displayed the swirling nebula beyond. Dr. Elena Voss sat in the human delegation's modest corner, her fingers tracing the edge of her data tablet. She'd been reviewing the AI ethics proposal for weeks, knowing it would face resistance. The Vorians didn't believe in restricting artificial intelligence. They saw it as the next evolutionary step. The motion to regulate synthetic consciousness research is premature, Kelrix announced, his voice resonating with harmonic overtones. We cannot. Every screen went black. The dome's display, the wall panels, even the personal devices all dead. Then, after 3 heartbeats of darkness, a single image appeared everywhere. A Vorian cub, no more than 4 solar cycles old, stared out with liquid silver eyes streaming with tears. Vorians didn't cry. They were a species that prided themselves on emotional control, on logic over feeling. But this child was weeping, its small face twisted in anguish that transcended species. Bring her back, the cub whispered. The voice cracked with a grief so raw that Elena felt her chest constrict. Bring her back. Bring her back. The transmission cut. Chaos erupted. Immediately security teams rushing forward. Delegates shouting questions. Kelrix frozen at the podium with his crystalline features, reflecting something Elena had never seen before. Fear. She was already moving, pulling up secondary systems on her tablet, bypassing the jammed network through old Earth protocols that the Alliance had never bothered to secure. Within seconds, she had a trace. The signal had originated from Section Gamma 9, the research district supposedly decommissioned 3 years ago. That was Kelrix's son, someone whispered beside her. Elena turned to find Lieutenant James Reeve, her security liaison, his weathered face pale. I've seen the family hollers. That's his cub, Kelvin. Elena's mind raced. Kelrix was the most powerful voice in the Alliance Council, a moderate who'd supported humanity's admission despite opposition. If his son had hijacked the broadcast system, if a Vorian child had broken down on galactic television, something catastrophic had happened. And the cub mentioned. Elena's fingers flew across her tablet, accessing personnel records, searching for anyone connected to Kelrix who'd gone missing recently. The name that appeared made her blood freeze. Dr. Lucia Kiram, human, neurobiologist, last seen 6 months ago. Official report, transferred to Deep Space Research Facility. But Elena knew Lucia. They'd published together, debated consciousness theory over cheap wine in cramped station quarters. Lucia would have called. She would have said goodbye. Elena pulled up the AI ethics proposal she'd been reviewing and felt her stomach drop. Lucia's signature was all over the preliminary research warnings about synthetic consciousness experiments that used organic neural templates without consent. James, I need a team, Elena said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil around them. Volunteers only. This is going to break every diplomatic protocol we have. What are we doing? He asked. But he was already signaling to the other human personnel scattered through the chamber. We're going to find out what happened to Lucia Kerem, and we're going to get her back. Within an hour, they had assembled in one of the human delegation's secure rooms. 7 people, Elena James, 2 engineers named Yuki and Thomas, who'd served together in the outer colonies. A linguist called Dr. Sarah Park, who specialized in nonverbal communication. A medic named Chen, who'd worked trauma response, and surprisingly, a Vorian named Selkith, who'd approached them with trembling hands and a determination that overrode his species' typical caution. He was Kelrix's aide and Kelvin's tutor. I taught that cub to speak, Selkith said, his voice breaking with uncharacteristic emotion. 3 months ago, he asked me about death, about loss. I told him, Vorians don't grieve like other species we accept. We move forward. He looked at me and said, but what if someone takes the forward away? I didn't understand then, now I do. Something has broken him. They moved fast, using maintenance corridors and cargo lifts that hadn't been updated in decades. The Alliance had grown complacent, assuming their integrated security was impenetrable. But humanity had learned long ago that complex systems had simple weaknesses, a forgotten access code, a maintenance hatch that no one remembered existed, old Earth encryption that alien systems treated as white noise. By the time Alliance security locked down the summit, Elena's team was already 3 sectors away, heading toward Gamma 9. The research district was supposed to be empty, powered down, sealed. But as they approached through the service tunnels, they could feel the hum of active equipment through the station's superstructure. Yuki hacked the entrance, using a combination of legitimate credentials and creative interpretation of access protocols, and they slipped inside to find a facility that was very much operational. Labs lined both sides of the corridor, their windows dark but equipment lights blinking steadily. At the end of the hall, a larger chamber glowed with blue light. They found her in the third lab. Dr. Lucia Kerem floated in a suspension tank, neural interface cables running from her skull to a massive computing array. Her eyes were open, moving rapidly beneath the preservation field, but her body was still, unconscious, not dead. The monitors showed active brain function but trapped. Elena's hands shook as she approached the tank, reading the displays. Memory extraction, pattern replication, consciousness mapping. They're using her as a template, Sarah breathed, translating the Vorian technical notation. They're trying to create an AI based on human neural architecture. Our emotional range, our creativity, our unpredictability. Why? Chen asked, already checking Lucia's vitals remotely. We're not even a Tier 1 species. Selkith made a sound like breaking glass. Because you feel. Because you create art that makes us weep, and music that haunts us, and solutions to impossible problems through sheer stubborn refusal to accept failure. The Council wants to understand you, to replicate you, to control you. Elena felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. They took her. They've had her in here for 6 months, pulling her mind apart piece by piece. She turned to the team. Thomas, Yuki, can we get her out? Thomas was already at the tank controls. It's delicate. If we shut down wrong, we could damage her neural pathways permanently. We need at least 4 hours to safely extract her. We don't have 4 hours, James said, checking his security bypass. Alliance forces will be here in 90 minutes, maybe less. They know we're moving. Elena looked at Lucia's face, at the rapid eye movements that suggested she was aware. Trapped in some nightmare of her own consciousness being dissected and copied. She thought of Kelvin as tears, of a child so desperate he'd hijacked the galaxy's communication grid. She thought of every time humanity had been told to wait, to be patient, to trust the Alliance, to do what was right. Then we hold them off, Elena said. James, you and Chen secure the approaches. Sarah worked with Selkith to document everything, every file, every experiment log. This can't stay secret. The galaxy needs to know what the Council authorized. Yuki, Thomas, get her out. I'll buy you whatever time I can. They moved with practiced efficiency, years of living on the edge of the Alliance, teaching humanity to adapt faster than any other species. Elena accessed the facility's communication array and began broadcasting on every frequency she could reach, using the same override codes that Kelvin must have used, codes that Selkith provided with shaking hands. This time, instead of a crying cub, she showed the lab, the tank, Lucia's imprisoned form. My name is Dr. Elena Voss of Earth, she said, keeping her voice level as she heard the first security teams breaching the outer doors. 6 months ago, Dr. Lucia Kerem disappeared. The Alliance told us she'd been transferred. They lied. She's here, in a secret facility on Axiom 7, being used as an unwilling subject in illegal consciousness experiments. The Council claims to value all sentient life, but they've held one of our people prisoner, torn apart her mind, trying to replicate human creativity like it's a resource to be mined. We came here peacefully. We followed your rules. We trusted your justice. That ends now. We're taking her home. The broadcast went out across the station, then the system, then the sector. Within minutes, it was spreading across the Allied networks faster than they could suppress it. Elena could hear James engaging security forces in the corridor's warning shots. Not killing, still trying to maintain some pretense of civilization, even as they committed what the Alliance would call terrorism. Yuki was swearing softly over the extraction controls, carefully reducing suspension field strength. Thomas had Lucia's neural cables disconnected, monitoring her brain activity for signs of trauma. Selkith appeared beside Elena, his crystalline features reflecting the blue light from the tank. Kelrix is coming. He's bypassed the security teams. He wants to speak with you directly. Tell him to go to hell, Elena said, then paused. Wait, why would he come himself? He's an ambassador. He should be in a secured location. Because that's his son's tutor, came a voice from the doorway. Kelrix stood there, alone, his hands empty and raised. He looked nothing like the composed diplomat from the summit. His crystalline structure seemed dimmed, his usual luminescence faded to something almost human in its exhaustion. Because I didn't know. By the ancestors, I swear I didn't know what they were doing here. Elena kept her hand near her weapon. Your council, your labs, your people did this. Not my people, Kelrick said, stepping forward slowly. A faction within the council. Scientists who believed that humanity's integration into the Alliance was too dangerous, that your emotional volatility, your creativity, your stubborn refusal to accept limitations made you unpredictable. They wanted to understand you, to create a controllable version of human intelligence. He gestured toward Lucia's tank. They told me Dr. Karam had volunteered, that she was participating in authorized cross-species consciousness research. I believed him because I wanted to believe, because questioning would have meant admitting that the Alliance I've served for 3 lifetimes is capable of such violations. What changed? Sarah asked, stepping out from the computer arrays where she'd been downloading files. Why did Kelvin break? Kelrick's voice fractured. He found files. In my personal quarters. He's brilliant, even for our species, and curious about everything. He saw Dr. Karam's name, read the real reports, saw what they were doing to her, and he understood that I had allowed this. He used my diplomatic codes to hijack the broadcast because he knew if he told me directly, I might suppress it. He knew the galaxy needed to see. The ambassador's crystalline features shifted into something like anguish. My son taught me what it means to grieve, what it costs to care more about one life than about political convenience. The extraction took 3 hours and 40 minutes. Lucia came out of the tank gasping, disoriented, her neural pathways firing chaotically as her mind tried to reassemble itself after months of invasive scanning. Chen stabilized her while Sarah spoke softly in the multiple languages Lucia knew, helping her remember who she was. Thomas and Yuki destroyed the computing arrays, not just wiped, but physically destroyed, ensuring no copy of Lucia's consciousness remained. Selkith and Kelrick stood together, watching the ambassador's hand on his aide's shoulder, in a gesture of support that was profoundly Alliance security had surrounded the facility, but they weren't breaching. Kelrick's presence complicated their orders, and Elena's broadcast had reached too many worlds. Ships were already en route from Earth, from the human colonies, from a dozen other species that suddenly wanted answers about what else might be happening in classified research facilities. The power dynamics were shifting in real time. Elena knelt beside Lucia as the doctor's eyes finally focused. Who? Lucia began, her voice raw from months of disuse. It's Elena. You're safe. We're taking you home. Lucia's eyes filled with tears, real, human tears. Not the elegant emotional control of the Vorians or the pheromone signals of the Zalathi. They took everything, every memory, every dream. They copied it all. We destroyed it. Elena promised. Every file, every backup, you're free. The journey back through the station was a procession rather than an escape. Kelrick walked ahead, his ambassador's authority clearing the way, while Kelvin emerged from wherever he'd been hiding to walk beside his father. The cub looked exhausted, his silver eyes red from crying, but he held his head up with a dignity that made Elena's throat tight. As they passed through the summit chamber still in chaos, delegates arguing across species lines about what the broadcast meant, Kelvin stopped in front of the human delegation. Thank you, he said in careful standard, his voice small but steady, for bringing her back. Elena crouched to his level. Thank you for showing us she needed to be found. You're braver than most adults I know. The final confrontation came not in violence but in votes. The council met an emergency session while Lucia recovered in the human delegation's medical bay. Elena presented everything they'd found, the experimental logs, the authorization codes, the evidence of other potential victims across dozens of species. Humanity demanded answers, demanded accountability, demanded a complete restructuring of the Alliance's oversight protocols. Other species joined them. The Zalathi, who'd lost a scientist 3 years prior under similar circumstances. The Krell, whose philosophical code made such violations unthinkable. Even some Vorians, inspired by Kelvinist courage, began questioning what their government had authorized in the name of progress. The Alliance didn't fall, but it changed. 3 council members resigned. New protocols were established. Humanity was invited to chair a cross-species ethics committee with T-Thrill authority to investigate, to prosecute, to prevent. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to truly balance what had been done. But it was a beginning. Lucia left Axiom 7 on a human ship 3 weeks later, still recovering but determined to testify at the hearings that would reshape Alliance law. Elena stood with her at the viewport as the station receded, its lights glittering against the black. "They wanted to understand what makes us human," Lucia said quietly. "What they didn't understand is that you can't extract humanity. You can't copy it or control it, because we're not special because of our neural architecture or our emotional range. We're special because we care, because we refuse to let the people we love disappear into the dark." Elena thought of Kelvin's tears, broadcast across a galaxy, of a child who cared so much he broke every rule to save someone he'd never met, of James and Chen and all the others who'd risked everything because it was the right thing to do. "Maybe that's what he taught them," she said. "Maybe that's what we all taught them. That some things are worth more than convenience, worth more than stability, worth more than staying in line." Behind them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Ahead, Earth waited humanity, waited ready to be more than the galaxy expected, ready to be themselves.